Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Here is President Felipe Calderon last week telling America how much we really suck. Here it is.
I strongly disagree with the recently adopted law in Arizona. It is a law.
Yeah. Stand up, everybody. Stand up, Chuck. Oh.
We oppose firmly the SB 1070 Arizona law.
Whatever. It's a very discriminatory law.
Okay,
enough. I've heard enough. It's a very discriminatory law. It's very, very bad. It's much better in Mexico, the way they treat people in Mexico, because if you come to Mexico and you want to work in Mexico, come across the border, you need to be of an economic, social benefit to society. Here's number one. You have to be of good character, no criminal record whatsoever. If you violate your visa, you go to prison. It's a felony. You're also banned from interfering with politics. If I went down to Mexico, I'd be banned from interfering in politics, which is weird. I wonder if people can, come together and have a protest on the streets. No, not in Mexico. No, not under Mexican law. And those who aid illegals are sent to prison. Well, thank you for telling us how bad we are, President Felipe Calderon. Beat it. Go home. You work on your own law. We're working ours. Hello, America. I just want to kind of have a conversation. There's so much to talk about today, and we're going to get into some of the news of the day, but I want to have a conversation with you on something that I've been thinking about recently a lot. People say to me, "Where is George Washington, Glenn? Where is the next leader?" I don't know. I don't know. But before there was Washington, there was Whitfield. Whitfield. He was a preacher. We did a special on him. Look at him. He was cross-eyed, pudgy. But this guy led to this guy. Okay? There's always a spiritual awakening, a spiritual element to any great change. And if there's not, if God is cut out of it, it always ends the way that it ended in France with Robespierre. Our founders were even fooled by Robespierre. It's a subtle difference. But without God, there is bloodshed and a guillotine. It just happens that way all the time. All society change. Societal change always comes with God first. Those who believe in God. The founders, it was an awakening. The Pilgrims, it was a spiritual thing. The Civil Rights Movement, Abraham Lincoln and the freeing of slaves. It started in churches. That's why the White House is using social justice now for the churches. That's why they got to get in there. They got to merge the EPA. I saw an article in USA Today that says, "Is Glenn Beck right?" Yes. Of course, they never said that. They just quoted Jim Wallace. They never actually answered the question. Good job, USA Today. No, seriously. That must have been hard to pick up the phone and call the White House and ask them. Best example of change and what God can do to a country is probably Russia. The change in Russia, the collapse of the Soviet Union as we know it, came with a Whitfield. But his name wasn't Whitfield, it was Pope John Paul. He was part of the perfect storm back then. The perfect storm then included war with Osama bin Laden, just like we have it now, spending themselves into oblivion because Reagan had Star Wars and Margaret Thatcher was on the other side, and John Paul awakening the Spirit, setting a fire in Poland, the fire of the Spirit. And Russia didn't collapse, it was transformed. Fundamental transformation. We are repeating history right now. We are repeating it. Yeltsin, the Ukraine, Belarus, they all got together in the woods and they decided what the Russian Federation would be. Then they came back and Yeltsin gave the Duma an hour to vote and said, "I got news for you. You can either be killed by the people outside because we've destroyed the country. It's over. It's over. We've spent ourselves into oblivion. And the people are wide awake. And so we can either face them, and you can fight for communism, or we can all go into the other room, change our uniforms, and pretend we're part of them. And we'll have fundamental transformation. And you, Mr. Colonel of the KGB, take off the uniform, put a suit on. Who knows, you could be president. And he was. When the Berlin Wall fell down, we went to sleep. And that's when the enemies of freedom in America went to work. We're facing a perfect storm now, just like Russia did. We have Islamic terror, just like Russia had with Osama bin Laden. I mean, it's the same guy, Islamic terror. We have corruption, unlike anything we've ever seen before. We have socialism and communism. Who even knew the communists were even... I read a website today from I think it was the Communist Party USA or Socialist. They're taking credit for a lot of the victories recently in the elections here in the last week. I didn't even know. I mean, did you even know these guys were even around anymore? They're rearing their ugly heads. Revolutionaries and anarchists. The G20 people. The people like Van Jones. We have faith. We have a fundamental misunderstanding of faith. We don't have faith really anymore. Some do, but our churches are dying out. I think it's because churches don't stand for anything anymore. Everything's just relative. Well, it's not relative. It's not. There are absolutes in life. There are things that absolutely suck, but you got to do them. Our faith is deteriorating, and it's being pushed that way. Being pushed by progressives. It was part of their plan. And so we don't go to church anymore. And one of the reasons why we don't go to church is because now it's becoming one with politics. Don't tell me who to vote for. Don't tell me about what happened to the priests and the pastors. So demand that your pastor start teaching the difference between an individual right and a collective right. Collective rights, and the same way France did with guillotines and blood. Individual rights. That's the thing that we had that was unique. Civil unrest. Now that's different. This is different than revolutionaries and anarchists. This is the Tea Party. This is you and me. Upset. We're pissed off. Look at what is happening to us. That's us. These are the people like SCIU. These are the people that are lighting fires all around the world. These are the unions and the revolutionaries that want to destroy. Media. Do you trust the media? Do you? Is there anybody, even me, do you trust me? Banks? Financial? Do you trust the banks anymore? Look at that. We've never had that perfect. We've conquered each of these individually, but never all at once. And they know that. So, just like when Reagan and Thatcher and John Paul and Osama bin Laden all got together, one way or another, and said, we're moving in this direction. They did, and they collapsed it. Well, that's what's happening with us. And our enemies now, the enemies of freedom, they're doing 5 things. 1, they're laundering people. Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers, how's the guy who blew up the Pentagon and police in the 1960s? How's the guy who on September 11th in the New York Times said, you know what, we didn't do enough. I don't regret blowing things up. On September 11th. How is that guy working for schools and speaking at universities? How? He's been laundered. He's been made legitimate. Take the T-shirt off. Put on a suit and tie. Does anybody even talk about his partner, the co-creator of the Weather Underground, part of the Apollo Alliance in New York, spending and designing the stimulus package in New York? Van Jones, a communist revolutionary who calls for a revolution. He's been laundered, made clean. Then they also laundered ideas, redistribution of wealth. It's become global warming. That's all it is. Organized crime has become community organizing. That's all it is. Third thing they did is connect with business, labor, the outcasts. I guess I have labor there twice. Acorn, communist, anybody. Anybody. The idea is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. This country, the things our founders, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. That's their enemy. And they don't want this system anymore. They'll let you keep the trappings of it, but they don't want to shut these people up. Then they had to complete the 1915 Progressive Plan, which was destroy our faith, our founders, and our Constitution. You know how they're doing that, destroying our faith. Look at this. I was in Norfolk, Virginia with Bill O'Reilly on Friday. Oh, it's very, very bad. It's much better in Mexico, the way they treat people in Mexico, because if you come to Mexico and you want to work in Mexico, come across the border, you need to be of an economic, social benefit to society. There's number one. You have to be of good character, no criminal record whatsoever. If you violate your visa, you go to prison. It's a felony. You're also banned from interfering with politics. If I went down to Mexico, I'd be banned from interfering in politics, which is weird. I wonder if people... Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Here is President Felipe Calderon last week telling America how much we really suck. Here it is.
I strongly disagree with the recently adopted law in Arizona. It is a law.
Yeah. Stand up, everybody. Stand up, Chuck.
We oppose firmly the SB 1070 Arizona law.
Whatever. It's a very discriminatory law.
Okay,
enough. I've heard enough. It's a very discriminatory law. People can, come together and have a protest on the streets. No, not in Mexico. No, not under Mexican law. And those who aid illegals are sent to prison. Well, thank you for telling us how bad we are, President Felipe Calderon.